Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into some seriously uncomfortable metal leggings, mounting a skittish horse, and charging headlong into the confusing, clunky world of medieval knighthood. You're not a prince, you're not a peasant. You're someone worse off than both. A knight. You hear the clang of chainmail as it settles around your shoulders like a cold, iron hug. The helmet slips over your head, and boom, instant tunnel vision. Your body is locked inside 60 pounds of steel armor. You can't move quickly, you can't hear well. Your sweat has nowhere to go but straight into your socks. Honestly, you're starting to realize you might have made a mistake. You haven't even fought anyone yet, and already you're exhausted and extremely itchy in places you can't reach. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the courtyard of a castle. The sky is slate gray, the wind is sharp, and a crow is judging you from a nearby wall. Your squire buckles the final strap on your greave, then steps back and mutters, "Good luck." Not exactly a pep talk. You take a step forward, and it sounds like a kitchen exploded. Your armor's not just heavy, it's designed to protect and restrict at the same time. Walking feels like waddling. Riding a horse, that's a trust fall on hooves. And if you fall off mid-battle, let's just say no one's dragging your tin can body back up again. You're basically a very brave beetle. Historians still argue whether the average knight actually wore full-plate armor in daily battle, or if it was reserved for tournament show-offs and nobles with very deep pockets. What we know for sure is that full suits of plate didn't even become common until the late Middle Ages. Before that, you're stuck with chainmail. Thousands of tiny iron rings pinching your armpits with every move. It's not exactly breathable. Think of it like medieval shapewear, but less flattering and more fatal. Armor wasn't one-size-fits-all either. It was tailored, expensive, custom forged by someone who, frankly, was more artist than blacksmith. That sounds luxurious until you realize if you gain 5 pounds or sprain a wrist, it stops fitting. And you've basically spent your family's yearly income on what is essentially a walking coffin. Now, when you do finally make it to battle, you're not charging with grace. You're wheezing. Visibility? Limited to a slot thinner than a Pop-Tart. Peripheral vision? Gone. You're turning your whole armored torso just to check if that guy on your right is your friend or someone who's definitely about to shank you. Oh, and that whole armor makes you invincible thing. Cute idea, but crossbows didn't care. By the 13th century, a peasant with a decent crossbow could pierce right through that expensive steel like it was cheese. And then there were early gunpowder weapons showing up in the 14th century. So, congratulations. You've invested in the medieval version of a Blockbuster membership just as Netflix is being invented. Let's also talk about sweating. Your body is sealed in. No ventilation, no zippers. You're basically broiling in your own bravery. There are no breaks in the middle of battle to unstrap and fan yourself. If the sun's out, your armor turns into a solar oven. If it rains, you're carrying an extra 20 pounds of soggy regret. There's this oddly specific tidbit. Some knights reportedly stuffed sponges soaked in vinegar into their helmets to combat the stink and help with breathing. Imagine your entire head smelling like salad dressing while you dodge arrows. Knights, not glamorous, just gross. By now, your sword arm's cramping. You haven't fought anyone yet, but you've had a full workout just walking across the courtyard. Your thighs are starting to protest, and there's a new blister forming on your heel. Welcome to the real knight experience. Equal parts adrenaline and athlete's foot. And while the movies love a good sword clash sequence, real medieval fighting was messy. You were more likely to grapple, trip, or bash someone with your shield than pull off a dramatic sword flourish. Knights didn't just duel. They scrapped like angry toddlers in full-body cosplay. The most ironic part, despite the armor, the training, and the glory, most knights didn't die in epic battles. They died of infections, bad falls, or just tetanus. Think about it. If you get gashed by a rusty blade and there's no penicillin, your odds aren't looking great. And no, your squire rubbing mud on it probably doesn't help. You trudge forward in this tale, your boots sinking slightly into the muddy ground, the echo of metal on stone following you like a clunky ghost. A dog barks in the distance, probably a mutt that outranks you in comfort. There's no going back. You've pledged yourself to a life of service, swordplay, and perpetual back pain. And all of this, the armor, the prestige, the romanticized suffering, was supposed to be a reward for being noble. But, spoiler, nobility doesn't mean comfort. It just means you suffer in style, or in steel, as the case may be dot. So, next time you see a knight on a stained glass window looking all majestic and heroic, remember this. That dude probably couldn't even tie his own shoes without help. Assuming his shoes weren't nailed to the stirrups, of course, you weren't born a knight, you were born a job listing. Right from your first scream in the drafty halls of some minor noble house, your future was already scribbled in medieval ink. You, dear heir number 3 or 4, will become a knight. Not out of love, but because someone had to. And your oldest brother already got the title, the land, and the good horse. Being noble might sound like you're lounging on embroidered pillows and eating grapes. But let's set that record straight. Your baby blanket was probably coarse wool. Your food was bland mush, maybe some dried apple if you were lucky. And the castle? Cold. Always cold. Stone isn't exactly warm or cozy, and fireplaces in these places weren't built for central heating. So picture a childhood of shivering, scraping ice off your cup before you drink from it, and trying not to get pneumonia in your own bedroom. Before your age even hits double digits, your life's been reduced to 2 key tasks: obey and endure. Your tutors drill Latin into your skull before you've even mastered wiping your nose. You copy phrases in clumsy ink on goatskin parchment, while your hand cramps and your tutor snores through a lecture about St. Augustine. There's no shortcut either. Latin is the language of prayer, power, and paperwork, and you're expected to master it before puberty. Meanwhile, your meals are meant to train you for hardship. You're chewing through leathery stew full of root vegetables that haven't seen seasoning since the last crusade. The bread is so stale it could double as armor plating. Occasionally, they toss you a scrap of meat, boiled beyond recognition because flavor is apparently a sin. Historians still argue whether noble children were coddled or toughened up intentionally, but judging by your blistered hands and hollow stomach, you're firmly in the tough love camp. Playtime? Sure. If your idea of fun is chasing a wooden hoop in the courtyard while avoiding your older cousin's flying elbows, you start to notice that nothing in your young life belongs to you. Your shoes were probably worn by a cousin. Your clothes are stitched from fabric that has already been someone else's tunic twice. Even your name might be recycled. Everything you are is on loan from someone who expects to be repaid in loyalty, skill, and someday, battlefield results. Around age 7, the real fun begins. You stop being just a noble child and start your training as a page. Basically, a glorified intern with better handwriting. You're sent away from home to live with a more prestigious noble family. The whole thing framed as education. But let's be honest, it's a house swap with chores. You arrive, clutching your only belongings, a knife, a comb, and maybe, if you're super lucky, a small prayer book. Your new lord greets you briefly, then hands you off to someone lower on the pecking order. You quickly learn your new place. Low. Very low. You're now the one fetching water, sweeping out muddy boots and trying not to spill wine on someone 3 times your size. And yet, there's still this weird sense of pride about it all. Because despite the blisters and the long hours and the endless shouting, you know this is how nights are made. You memorize etiquette like your life depends on it. Because one wrong move at a feast and you're out. You're bowing to everyone, reciting family lineages, and learning how to enter a room without tripping over your own cloak. One particularly fun aspect of your new education. Falconry. That's right. You get to stand completely still while a bird with murder eyes lands on your arm. If you flinch, your master laughs. If the bird poops on you, your master still laughs. But it's all part of the training. Discipline, grace under pressure, and resisting the urge to scream when talons dig into your forearm. There's also the occasional lesson in music or dance. But don't let that fool you. This isn't a Renaissance fair. You're not playing a lute under the stars. You're fumbling with a bone flute in front of a tutor who smells like boiled onions and disappointment. One wrong note, and it's back to polishing someone's boots with spit and a cloth that used to be your undershirt. Quirky tidbit. There are records of some pages having to sleep in the same room as their master, sometimes even on the floor beside the bed. Not for luxury, for service. Midnight drink requests. Waking up early to dress them. You are a human alarm clock with absolutely no snooze button. And the beatings? Oh, they happen. Maybe not full-on Game of Thrones levels of brutality, but getting cuffed across the ear or whacked with a stick for forgetting a title? Pretty standard. It's called discipline, and you're supposed to thank them for it. You're learning to obey without question, because one day someone will shout, "Shield wall," and you'll need to move before thinking. By the end of your time as a page, you're maybe 10 or 11 years old. But already you've served dinners, memorized lineages, mucked out stables, and had at least one minor burn from a clumsy fireplace accident. Your body is sore, your brain is crowded with family crests, and you haven't seen your actual parents in years. But despite it all, despite the cold, the noise, the chores, there's this flicker of pride every time you help buckle someone's sword belt or recite the Lord's Prayer from memory. You're not a warrior yet, but you're not a child anymore either. You're something in between. A page, dreaming of armor that doesn't itch, and glory that doesn't smell like horse dung. You lie awake on your straw-stuffed mattress, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in the stone walls, and wonder if someday you'll be the one giving orders. Maybe, if you survive puberty. You're 12 now, maybe 13 if you've been lucky enough to dodge illness, horse kicks, and falling off castle walls. Your page days are wrapping up, and you've graduated from human errand boy to slightly older errand boy with weapons. Welcome to the next rung on the exhausting glory light ladder, the life of a squire. Being a squire means you're now attached to a fully fledged knight, like a loyal sidekick. If that sidekick were expected to clean armor, carry gear, tend the war horse, and also maybe die if things go sideways. You're his shadow, his servant, his backup dancer, and yes, still the guy who gets yelled at when someone forgets their favorite sword polish. Your knight, Sir Aldrich, let's say, is a grizzled veteran with breath like boiled garlic and a temper to match. He's kind of like a dad figure. If your dad was chronically angry and wore 20 pounds of steel to dinner, your day starts before dawn. Always. Before the roosters, before the chapel bells, before your body has had time to remember how sore it is. You stumble out of your flea-ridden straw bed and begin by rushing down Sir Aldrich's destrier. That's a war horse, by the way, not a pony, not a gentle palomino. A snorting, plate-sized hoofed beast that looks at you like you owe it money. And yes, you do have to pick the hay out of its teeth. That's somehow your job now. While Sir Aldrich drinks something disgusting and talks about the good old days when enemies screamed properly, you're lugging around buckets of water to clean his armor piece by piece. Remember that full suit of gleaming plate we talked about earlier? Yeah, guess who's scrubbing off yesterday's dried blood and mystery goo? You're basically a medieval car wash for people. And if there's a tournament or a minor skirmish nearby, congratulations, you get to carry the knight's weapons, shield, and his second-best sword. You know, the one he only uses if he drops the good one. Your job is to stay close, keep him armed, and somehow not die. There's a reason squires don't tend to make it into epic poems. Quirky tidbit for you. Some squires would practice riding while carrying a live pig under one arm. Yes, a pig, because if you could do that, you were ready to ride into battle carrying a shield or lance. Imagine squealing pig, panicked horse, and a teenage boy trying not to fall off. Medieval multitasking at its finest. You're also learning how to fight now. Finally. Sword drills, lance practice, shield maneuvers. It's exciting until your practice partner whacks you on the helmet hard enough to knock your ears into next week. The bruises pile up, but so do the skills. It's a long, bruisey apprenticeship, and the stakes are high. If you screw up on the field, your knight dies, and then, well, you probably do too. There's a certain irony to this life. You're training constantly for war, but you also have to be a courtly gentleman. So, between sparring matches, you're being grilled on poetry, manners, and how to bow just the right amount. Not too low, you're not a servant, but not too high. You're not the king. You're expected to help carry letters, sing at feasts, and maybe even compose a love poem or two in clunky French, because nothing says battlefield badass like badly rhymed sonnets. Historians still debate just how formal squire training really was, whether it followed a strict curriculum or if it was more of a chaotic, learn-by-surviving system. Judging by how often you end the day with at least 3 minor injuries, we're leaning toward the chaos theory. And yes, you get a sword of your own now, but it's mostly ceremonial. It's not even sharp. As kind of like giving a plastic fork to someone on a steak diet. You'll still train with it daily, hoping your real chance to shine doesn't arrive too soon, like in the middle of an actual battle. Sometimes Sir Aldrich lets you accompany him to parley meetings with other knights or even nobles. You stand in the corner, hands clasped, eyes wide, trying to soak it all in while making yourself invisible. You'll watch men argue over land, rights, or whose cousin insulted whom during last summer's feast. Feudal politics are messy, dramatic, and often as petty as high school group chats. Oh, and remember your Latin lessons from childhood? They're back. Now you're expected to read out letters and scribe notes while standing in muddy boots and trying not to sneeze on the parchment. One blotch and it's back to sword drills, extra sweaty edition. And don't get too comfortable. You're still doing chores, still cleaning wounds, still rubbing vinegar into boot leather. And if your knight's been in battle recently, you're also checking him for broken ribs and lice. Yes, that's part of the job. No, there's not enough vinegar in the world. Occasionally, there are moments of strange calm. A sunset after a long ride. A night spent by a fire. Eating a rare bit of roasted meat and laughing with other squires about whose knight snores the worst. You might even get a nod of approval from Sir Aldrich, which feels about as warm and rare as sunlight in a dungeon. A squire's life is rough, but these little wins keep you going. You start to notice the way knights carry themselves, the confidence, the stillness, the scars. You're starting to copy it, even without realizing. You walk a little straighter. You answer more clearly. The armor you once struggled to lift is now familiar in your hands. The sword doesn't shake when you hold it anymore, and so, night by night, bruise by bruise, you shape yourself into someone more than just a helper. You're no longer just dreaming of knighthood. You're inching toward it. Dot. Just don't trip over your own boots on the way there. You're 15 now, maybe 16 if no one stopped to count. Your voice has dropped. Your chin's doing its best to sprout fuzz, and your body is finally starting to fit into the chainmail without toppling over like a baby goat in steel pajamas. And with this new awkward, clanky confidence comes a promotion of sorts. You're no longer just a squire. You're now an almost knight, which sounds great until you realize this is the phase where you get very closely acquainted with three things: muck, bruises, and a whole lot of horse dung. You're now expected to train harder, ride faster, and haul heavier things, often uphill, often while being shouted at. There's no more, "Oops, I dropped the sword." There's only, "Oops, I dropped the sword and now I've been hit in the ribs with a wooden lance." Speaking of lances, jousting practice is now part of your life. You spend your days thundering down narrow lanes on horseback, trying to ram a long stick into a wooden target, or if it's tournament season, into another teenager who is also trying not to die. Spoiler, it usually ends with someone face-planting. Often it's you. And, of course, the horses. You thought you knew horses before, you didn't. Knights ride destriers, massive, temperamental tanks with manes. These aren't your average plow ponies. These are war beasts bred for battle, trained to kick, bite, and trample with flair. You're expected to care for yours personally now. Groom it, feed it, sleep near it. If your destrier catches a cold, you might as well catch one too, because your entire future rides, literally, on that creature's well-being. There's this especially lovely task where you get to check the horse's hooves for stones, while it chews hay and pretends it's not about to kick you into next week. Horses do not care about your dreams of chivalry. They care about oats and winning every passive-aggressive power struggle. A quirky tidbit? Some squires were taught to mimic the horse's movements while training for mounted combat. Yes, this means you're galloping around on foot in full gear, trying to coordinate your steps like a prancing war animal. It's both exhausting and humiliating. You look like a very confused armored goat, and everyone is pretending not to laugh. Historians still debate whether war horses were truly loyal partners or just expensive battering rams. Either way, you're stuck cleaning up after one, brushing out its tail with numb fingers while whispering, "Please don't kill me today." But it's not all horses and head injuries. You're starting to take part in real military campaigns now. You don't lead yet, but you ride behind, carrying banners, delivering messages, sharpening weapons, and occasionally getting thrown into skirmishes when the knight needs someone expendable. That's you, by the way, the expendable one. Your first battle is a blur. You remember the sound before anything. The thunder of hooves, the whistle of arrows, the guttural yells from all sides. It's chaos, wet mud, the metallic taste of fear in your mouth. You're not swinging your sword like a hero. You're swinging it wildly and praying it hits something that's not wearing your colors. And yet, something changes after that. You survive. You limp off the field, aching, dirty, and maybe missing a chunk of pride, but alive. You're no longer just pretending to be a knight. You're living it, scars and all. You also start seeing how brutal, and honestly, how boring the glory can be. A lot of time in the field is spent waiting. Waiting for orders. Waiting for weather. Waiting while someone argues about maps. You sit on your helmet like a stool, eat cold bread out of a cloth pouch, and try not to think about how long it's been since your last bath. If ever. Back at the manor or castle, your duties only multiply. You're learning the logistics of command, how to read maps, calculate provisions, and figure out how many angry peasants it takes to dig a moat. You attend more feasts now, not as a servant, but not quite as a guest either. You're in the limbo zone, slightly important, but still expected to refill the wine if no one else is around. You're also starting to draw attention. Some of the noble ladies glance your way now, less because you're handsome, you still smell like saddle grease and onion soup, and more because you're almost someone. In the medieval dating scene, proximity to land and violence is apparently very attractive. You've even started practicing your knightly oath, the sacred vow you'll make soon, promising to serve your lord, protect the weak, uphold justice, and resist temptation. Mostly, it's a nice speech. You know it by heart. Whether anyone lives by it is another matter entirely. Let's not forget that you're also being judged constantly. Every misstep, every fumbled etiquette, every dull response during a feast, your knight notices. The other nobles notice. Even the squires in the stables notice. Reputation is everything. Lose it, and you may as well go home and become a monk. Or worse, an accountant. And so, each morning you rise a little earlier. Train a little harder. Speak a little more carefully. Your shoulders bear the weight of expectation now, not just armor. You're no longer the boy chasing horses. You're the man feeding one before riding it into danger. And it's exhausting. Physically, mentally, emotionally. The idea of a gallant knight is starting to feel like a fairy tale. especially after your third sleepless night tending to Sir Aldrich's infected sword wound with a cloth soaked in wine. You're doing more healing than heroics lately, still, in the quiet moments. Those rare candlelit evenings when everyone else is snoring into their mead. You can feel it. You're close. So close. The dub is coming. The ceremony. The sword. The title. You're nearly a knight. All you have to do now is survive a little longer. The day of your knighting ceremony arrives, and honestly, you're nervous. Not the kind of nervous where you forget someone's name at dinner. The kind of nervous where your palms are sweating through gloves, your knees are threatening to give out, and your stomach feels like it's been hosting a joust of its own. You've trained for this moment for over a decade. You've bled, bruised, been kicked by horses, and possibly insulted by a falcon. And now, you're about to kneel in front of a lord, maybe even a king, and be officially dubbed a knight. Serious drumroll, please. It's the day of your dubbing, and there's a distinct chill in the air, but it's not just the weather. It's the weight of what's about to happen. You've fought the good fight, worn the scars, and learned the rules of feudal life in a way that's more bruising than educational. But now, finally, the moment has come. You're about to receive your spurs, your sword, your official title. You're about to become a knight. You're about to be part of the Brotherhood of Warlords, wielders of heavy swords and, if we're being honest, a lot of dirty laundry. First things first, let's talk about the ceremony. You don't just wake up, toss on a pair of tights, and have a party. No, the dubbing ritual is an ordeal, a long, formal event with more ceremony than you could possibly appreciate while your back is aching from weeks of being thrown around in armor. You stand before your lord, the bishop, and a few dozen onlookers. Everyone's dressed in their best. The smell of fresh baked bread and nervous sweat hangs in the air. They've probably asked you to take a bath before this, which is an odd suggestion because you've been in the same armor for days and slept on the ground for weeks. You've probably never smelled worse. But this is a big moment, and they want you to look somewhat presentable. The bishop says some words you don't quite understand about knights and godliness and oaths and salvation. But the real action comes when your lord taps you on the shoulder with a sword. No, not a "let's see if you can fight" tap. More like a "you're officially allowed to stand around with a sword now" tap. You've probably been using a sword for years, but now it's officially yours. It's like being handed the keys to a car you've been driving for months, except with a lot more divine intervention and public expectation. You kneel, swear your oaths, and stand again. That's it. You've been knighted. But before you get too comfortable, remember, becoming a knight is less like winning a medal and more like being given a bigger set of responsibilities. You now have a title, yes, but that title comes with expectations and duties. Real ones. No one's going to treat you like a hero because you've got a sword. Instead, you're now a grown-up servant of the realm. It's a strange, heady feeling. And there's the war. The immediate war. Because you've been waiting to be knighted so that you could get out there and fight, right? Well, here's the kicker. You're no longer just an eager squire looking for the first battlefield to stumble onto. You're now expected to lead. You're expected to rally your men, make decisions, and have them believe that you have any idea what you're doing. First battle as a knight. It's likely a mess. It's not glorious. It's just gritty and painful. And because you're newly knighted, No one expects you to have it all figured out, but they also don't want to hear you ask questions on the battlefield. They expect you to charge, to lead, to shout, to swing, and, most importantly, to survive. But let's talk about something you won't hear much about in the songs, the politics. It's easy to romanticize knighthood when the ballads are playing and the women are swooning, but the reality is that most of your days are spent in feudal squabbles, managing your estate, and dealing with the occasional uprising. There's a lot of haggling, court gossip, and feasts where the food is cold, but the politicking is hotter than ever. You have to be careful who you trust, because being a knight also means playing a game of chess. Are you loyal to your lord, or do you take the side of a more powerful noble? Do you engage in petty revenge for some perceived slight, or do you maintain the chivalric ideals of justice and mercy, even though you know that might cost you your position or your life? It's exhausting, it's confusing, and it's necessary. Let's also not forget the lesser-known parts of knighthood, like the constant, unspoken competition. You're not just trying to be good at sword fighting or jousting. You're competing against other knights for prestige, land, and power. Every tournament is a battle for more influence. Every victory adds a new line to your name. Every defeat chips away at your reputation. And while the public cheers when you win, behind closed doors, there's a whole lot of backstabbing happening among your fellow knights. It's not easy being a knight. In fact, it kind of sucks. Sure, you've got the title. Sure, you've got the armor, the sword, and the horse, but that doesn't mean you're free to do whatever you want. You're still a servant, just a really fancy one now. And you can't escape the fact that every battle, every decision, every political move you make could result in your death, or someone else's. It's a life that doesn't allow for rest. Your body's sore, your armor's heavy, and your stomach is always just a little bit too empty. You spend most of your time on horseback, riding through muddy roads and old forests, your boots perpetually soggy, your muscles forever aching. It's not glamorous. It's a lifestyle that demands everything from you. And in return, you get a title, a handful of lands, and the knowledge that the next battle could be your last. You may have thought becoming a knight was the culmination of your journey, but it's not. In fact, it's just the beginning of the grind. The life of a knight is exhausting. And unless you're lucky enough to inherit land or find favor with your liege lord, you'll spend the rest of your days fighting for your place in a world that moves like an endless, bloody chessboard. It's time to sharpen your sword, hoist your shield, and ride out once again. Because that's what knights do. The grind doesn't stop. You thought the dubbing would mark the moment when you finally got to rest, when you could kick back, maybe enjoy a few months of peace. But that was a lie. If you want to be a true knight, a successful knight, you're in for a life of constant motion, a life that demands you're always ready to ride, always ready to fight. You'll spend more time on the road than in any castle, and the more you gain, whether in land, renown, or power, the more enemies you make. It's an endless cycle of war, feasts, and power struggles. One of the first things you realize after being knighted is that you're not really in control of anything. Sure, you've got your sword and your title, but the people above you, your lord, your king, the nobles, are the ones pulling the strings. You're just a pawn in a much larger game. They dictate when you go to war, who you fight, where you fight, and sometimes even why you fight. Knights were supposed to protect the realm, but more often than not, they were sent off to battle to protect the ambitions of others. And let's talk about those battles. You've probably fought in a few skirmishes by now, maybe even survived a larger campaign. You know the basics: charge when told, defend when necessary, and try not to die. But the truth is, the more you fight, the more you realize just how pointless many of these conflicts are. They're not for honor or glory. They're about land, power, resources, or simple revenge. It's a constant cycle, a bloody wheel that you can never fully escape. The worst part: you're often fighting alongside knights who don't even believe in what they're doing. They're not fighting to defend the realm or protect the innocent. They're fighting because they have to. It's a job for them, just like it is for you. A job that demands sacrifice, but offers little reward outside of more battles and more responsibility. Now, you're faced with a particularly grim reality. Battle doesn't just take its toll on your body, it wears you down mentally. You begin to question the point of it all. You're not just bruised from swords and spears, your heart's bruised too. Your days are filled with constant tension, and the knowledge that anyone you care about could be dead tomorrow. The families of fallen knights are left with the mess. Your families, your lands, your obligations. It's a thankless existence. And the worst part? You know it'll only get worse as you climb the ladder of knighthood. But still, you can't escape the siren call of honor. The code, the ideals. You've memorized it. You've sworn to follow it. And even though your armor feels a little heavier with every battle, you keep pushing forward, one sword swing at a time. And then there are the politics. Oh, the politics. You probably thought you'd escape the courtly schemes and backstabbing once you were knighted. You thought it was all about the battlefield, right? Wrong. Now you're expected to navigate a web of alliances, rivalries, and feudal obligations that make the battlefields look like child's play. Your lord might want your help in securing a marriage alliance. Or maybe he wants you to put pressure on a neighboring noble for some land or favor. And the worst part? You have to do it, even if you know the whole thing is dirty. Because as a knight, your loyalty is to your lord, and your lord's interests are always more important than your own. The moment you step out of line, you're marked. Historians still argue whether the feudal system ever truly worked as intended, or if it was just a convoluted mess of power grabs that worked better for the very few at the top. One thing's for sure: if you wanted to get anywhere, you had to play the game. But just when you think it can't get worse, your lord might send you off on a crusade. Ah, the Crusades. That grand, bloody project where knights, with all their idealism and delusions of heroism, are sent off to fight for God and Christianity in distant lands. Except, no one's ever really told you why the Holy Lands are so important, or why you need to take a sword to a pagan when there are perfectly decent Christians in your own kingdom to deal with. But you're a knight. You have your vows. You don't question the mission. You just follow orders. The travel is grueling. The weather's terrible. You're riding through deserts, battling against heat stroke and hunger. And when you finally arrive, it's not the promised land of divine glory. It's more mud, more blood, more endless struggles that have nothing to do with honor and everything to do with war, profiteering, and religious conflict. You're exhausted, and every day feels like a repetition of the last. The heat of the battle isn't just from the swords. It's from the despair that settles in your bones. This isn't what you signed up for, but there's no way out now. You've crossed the point of no return. Meanwhile, back home, your lands are likely being ravaged. Your estates are being watched by rivals who are always sniffing for weakness. It doesn't matter that you're fighting for the greater good, or whatever you've been told is the greater good. Everything back home is crumbling. At some point, you start wondering, is this worth it? You can't go back now. You've made too many oaths. You've taken too many lives. You've killed for your Lord, fought for your faith, bled for a cause that was never entirely yours. And the more you fight, the more you realize that the life of a knight doesn't really offer much in return. Sure, you might be feared, you might be respected, but you'll never be truly free. In those quiet moments, when the battlefield is calm, you think back to when you were a squire. Those days when you still had dreams of becoming a knight. You thought knighthood was the pinnacle of life, the final destination. Now that you've reached it, you can't help but feel it's more of a trap. The higher you rise, the more entangled you become in the endless battles, the constant feuds, the brutal demands of both the crown and your conscience. You're a knight now, but are you any happier for it? A few months have passed since that first crusade. Your body's still aching, your spirit a little worn down, but you've learned to mask it all behind your polished armor and knightly demeanor. The thing no one tells you about knighthood is that the whole life, at least the part that involves being a knight, is a relentless march forward, even when you'd rather turn around. You've trained for battle, but no one trained you for the weight of having to constantly prove yourself, for the constant chipping away of your ideals, for the bitter realization that knighthood might just be a lifelong struggle against your own fatigue. The world around you hasn't changed much. You still ride out on the orders of your lord, still raise your sword to defend land that doesn't belong to you, still swear to uphold a code that, on the best of days, feels impossible to follow. The battlefield calls, the politics churn, and you, well, you get to figure out how to survive in the middle of it all. But here's the funny part. You're not just a knight now. You're a middle-ranking noble, and that means you're expected to manage things, estate things, land things, and people things. You are supposed to be responsible for everything from your crops to your soldiers, from the taxes of your tenants to the upkeep of your castle. You have retainers now, men who owe their loyalty to you, and you owe them food, safety, and pay. But your role in all this isn't exactly glamorous. No one ever tells you about the stacks of paperwork that come with the job. Okay, there aren't literally stacks of paperwork in the way we think of today, but it's just as tedious. You'll have to sign things, approve things, manage contracts with local peasants, and negotiate with other lords. Sure, your sword is handy, but what you'll really need is a sharp mind and a sharp eye for detail. That means dealing with debts and taxes, and the incredibly fun task of making sure that peasants aren't squatting on your land and stealing from your supply stores. You'll spend hours on this, whether you like it or not. The worst part? Every time you think you're getting somewhere, someone will remind you that you're not actually a lord yet. You may be a knight, but you're still the foot soldier in someone else's game. You might have a house, some land, and a couple of stewards, but the title Sir doesn't mean you get to make the big calls. In fact, there's a certain point where you'll start to notice how much you've been exploited in the name of knighthood. You were promised glory, but all you've gotten is a series of increasingly confusing land deals and awkward banquets with people you can't stand. You've got the status, sure, but your honorable title also means you have a target on your back. You're a knight who has to keep proving he deserves the title. Every squabble, every minor insult, every little political faux pas is magnified tenfold. And God help you if you have a feud with another knight. Those things don't resolve themselves. They either escalate into full-on war or die out in a series of petty arguments. But in the meantime, you have to manage them. Historians still debate the true impact of knighthood on local economies. Some argue that knights were the economic backbone of feudal society, ensuring that local lords had everything they needed to support the realm. Others argue knights were nothing but parasites, living off the labor of peasants while offering little of real value in return. Whichever side you lean toward, it's clear that being a knight often means balancing the demands of land, people, and honor in ways you never anticipated. Still, as much as it all feels like a bad dream, you can't deny that this life is what you fought for. Even in the chaos of paperwork, feasts, and squabbles, there's a strange satisfaction that comes from knowing you've earned your place. But it's fleeting, just like all those moments when you thought you'd finally made it. You never truly make it. You just keep going, and going. Eventually, you might find yourself in another campaign. Maybe it's a local skirmish, or maybe it's a large-scale conflict in another kingdom. Either way, it's your responsibility to lead, to fight, and to bring honor to your lord, to your family name, and to the ideal of chivalry that now seems a little more like a distant, fading memory than a guiding light. On the battlefield, things have shifted too. You've seen enough to know what's coming. The fighting hasn't become easier, but you've grown colder, more calculating. The sword doesn't feel as sharp as it once did, but your grip has hardened. You're no longer the eager young squire, full of naive dreams of heroism. You're someone who knows how to fight, how to command, and how to get through the next day alive. But that doesn't mean you enjoy it. It doesn't mean it's any less exhausting. In fact, it might be worse. The weight of knighthood, the weight of always being on call to defend the realm or act in your lord's name. It all feels a little more oppressive now. There's less glory, less excitement, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to ask, was this all worth it? You've gotten what you wanted, haven't you? You're a knight, part of a legendary order. You've trained, you've fought, you've earned your spurs. But there's something nagging at you now, something that wasn't there in the days before the knighthood. It's the knowledge that even when you're the one holding the sword, you are still just a piece of the bigger puzzle. And sometimes, the puzzle's not even a pretty picture. As the battle rages on around you, you find yourself asking what happens when the fighting ends. You know you'll keep pushing forward, but for how long? How much longer can you live this life, constantly balancing the demands of honor with the bitterness of reality? The answer, as it turns out, is a lot longer than you probably want. You've reached the point where you're no longer sure whether you're fighting for your lord's land, your honor, or just to survive. Either way, you'll be on the front lines. You'll continue your march forward because that's what knights do. But deep down, you can't shake the feeling that no matter how much you conquer, how much you gain, or how much you lose, it's never going to be enough. Your life has become an endless cycle of feasts, battles, and obligations, and it's starting to weigh heavily on you. You've long since stopped feeling the rush of excitement you once had when you first donned your armor. At first, the thrill of proving yourself was enough to keep you going. The adrenaline of battle, the pride of being recognized by your peers. the knowledge that you were fulfilling an ancient tradition. But now it feels like you're just playing a part in someone else's story. You've become a cog in the machine of feudal politics, and that machine never stops. Days blend into weeks, weeks into months, and even the victories you once celebrated feel empty. Sure, you've won battles, secured lands, and even added to your personal reputation. But what's the point? Your enemies, the ones you thought would fall at your feet, are still fighting. Your lord is still demanding more. The peasants are still grumbling about taxes and land rights. The songs sung about your victories are quickly forgotten. You've become just another knight, another face in the ever-growing tide of armored men fighting to survive in a world that seems indifferent to your struggle. What's worse, you start to notice something. The world is changing, and you're being left behind. This isn't the world you grew up in, the world where knights were the kings of the battlefield, where the future was as bright as the gleaming steel of your sword. You see the new ways of warfare creeping in. Longbowmen, crossbowmen, and even early gunpowder weapons. The very role you were raised to perform, to wield that sword and strike down your enemies, is becoming obsolete. Historians still debate the exact impact of the longbow on the end of knightly dominance. Some argue that it was the decisive weapon that rendered the heavily armored knight obsolete, while others believe the decline of feudalism was the true cause. Either way, the truth is undeniable. The age of the knight was fading, and with it, the very purpose of your existence. You try to adapt, of course. You train with different weapons. You try to make sense of the new tactics being taught at court. But every time you try to adjust, you realize just how out of touch you are. The armor that was once the symbol of your strength feels heavier, less practical. The sword that had once been an extension of your arm now feels like an awkward relic from a bygone age. And it's not just the weapons that are changing. The very structure of society is evolving. The rise of mercenaries is shifting the balance of power. Lords are no longer just looking for knights to fight their battles. They're looking for men who can lead armies, raise funds, and outmaneuver rivals with strategic alliances. The glory of knighthood is starting to seem like something of the past. A fading ideal that belongs more to song and legend than to the gritty reality of the modern world. But, the kicker, you're stuck in the middle of it. You can't just give up being a knight. You've sworn the oaths, you've built your reputation, and above all, you've been trained your entire life for this. You can't just hang up your armor and walk away. You have to adapt, even if you don't know how. You must figure out how to survive in a world that seems to have moved on from you, and fast. As you find yourself in yet another battle, you start to notice the difference between you and your younger self. The young man who entered knighthood with dreams of glory is gone, replaced by someone who is tired, bitter, and increasingly disillusioned with the whole thing. You don't fight for honor anymore. You fight because you have to. You fight because you don't know what else to do. The bloodshed, the screaming, the chaos. It's all the same now. The faces of your fallen comrades blur into a nameless sea of grief. The land you fought to defend is no longer a source of pride. It's just another piece of property that will eventually be handed down to someone else. The battle doesn't feel like a fight for glory anymore. It feels like a never-ending cycle of destruction that only serves to feed the insatiable hunger of kings, lords, and mercenary captains. And what's worse, you start to feel the loneliness creeping in. The camaraderie of knights, once a source of pride, has become hollow. The men you ride with aren't brothers in arms. They're just colleagues, just fellow soldiers, who are just as eager to see you fall as they are to survive. The brotherhood of knighthood, the very thing that once defined your existence, has become nothing more than a means to an end. You can't remember the last time you shared a laugh with a fellow knight that didn't feel forced. You've built a life based on ideals of honor, loyalty, and chivalry. But now, you're starting to realize that those ideals don't hold up in a world where power and money are the true forces that drive society. The lords and kings you've served don't care about your honor. They care about your loyalty and your ability to fight. And the common folk, they don't see you as a protector. They see you as another layer of oppression, another part of the feudal system that keeps them trapped in poverty. Historians still argue whether knights were ever as noble as they were portrayed in the tales of chivalry. Some say they were always warriors for hire, driven by personal ambition and greed. Others argue that the ideal of the knight was a real, genuine attempt to live a virtuous life. The truth is likely somewhere in between. The reality of knighthood was complex, far removed from the polished, romanticized version seen in ballads and stories. And yet, here you are, living that complex reality, day in and day out, in a world that's leaving you behind. The swords you once cherished now feel heavy in your hands. The armor you used to wear with pride now feels like a prison, and every battle, every political maneuver, every decision to protect the realm or defend your lord feels less and less like a choice, and more like a requirement for survival. You've realized something. Knighthood wasn't the dream it promised to be. It wasn't freedom. It wasn't glory. And it wasn't honor. It was a lifetime of obligation. A life that, for all its highs, has its inevitable lows. And in those moments of silence, when the battle's over and the dust settles, you can't help but wonder if you've missed something along the way. It's been years now. You've fought in countless battles, forged alliances, broken some, and fought for your lord as if it were the only thing that mattered. You've carved your name into the annals of history, but it's not the legacy you imagined. You imagined songs sung in your honor, the love of the people, and a life lived by the ideals of chivalry. Instead, you've ended up as another soldier, an instrument of power, a tool used and discarded as soon as it's no longer useful. The world is changing, and not just in small ways. The social order is beginning to crack, and you can feel the tremors. It started with the peasants, the ones who would traditionally bow to you as a knight. They're no longer content with their lot in life. They're protesting. They're demanding more rights, more freedom. The old ways are being questioned, and the old ways are you. The knights who hold the power, the ones who enforce the laws. And that's the thing. The peasants used to fear you, and they used to look to you for protection. But now they look at you like you're just another burden. They don't see honor in your armor anymore. They see an oppressor, a tool of a feudal system that they're growing increasingly tired of. What was once a sacred bond between the knight and the common folk has become something less, something corrupt and exploitative. And what's even worse is that deep down, you know they're right. You've spent your entire life upholding a system that's broken, a system that doesn't care about the people, a system that was always designed to keep them down. Historians still argue whether the rise of the common man, the eventual overthrow of feudal systems, could have been avoided if knights had embraced change. Some think knights were too entrenched in their ideals to recognize the need for reform. Others argue that knights, even if they'd wanted to, were powerless against the rising tide of new economic systems and military technologies. In truth, it doesn't matter now. The world is evolving, and you're stuck in a dying era. Your own life has been a testament to that. You've become a relic, a living reminder of a time that's passing. When you look at the younger knights, those fresh-faced recruits, eager for glory and power, you don't see the hope you once felt. Instead, you see them following in your footsteps, chasing the same hollow dreams you once did. You've lived it, you've fought for it, and now all you have to show for it is the weight of years in battle, the scars on your body and soul, and a slow, aching realization that it was all for nothing. You're not sure when it started, but somewhere along the way, the sword became more of a burden than a tool. At first, it felt like an extension of your will, a symbol of your power and purpose. But over the years, it's grown heavier. Every swing, every clash, every time you've raised it in the name of your Lord, or for some cause that seemed so righteous at the time, it's felt more and more pointless. The honor you fought for, was it ever truly yours to claim? The younger knights seem to believe in it. They believe in the idea of knighthood, the honor, the loyalty, the code, and part of you wants to believe in it again. You want to feel that rush, that fire, that sense of purpose. But it's not there. What's left now is a deep, gnawing emptiness. You fight not because it's noble, not because it's right, but because you've always fought. It's what you know, and in a way it's easier to keep going than to stop. But you've seen enough to understand the futility of it all. You're not making the world a better place. You're just following orders, participating in a cycle of bloodshed that's never going to end. The very things you swore to defend, honor, justice, the realm, are all just words now. Your honor was always a pawn in the game of politics. Justice was never truly on your side. And the realm? Well, the realm's always been about whoever's in power. And right now, that's not you. And it's not just the peasants you failed. It's the people who were supposed to be your brothers, your fellow knights. Many of them have become as disillusioned as you, caught in the same trap, fighting for the same ideals that no longer hold any weight. They've all built their lives on the same foundation of chivalry and honor that you did. But like you, they can't help but feel that it's crumbling under their feet. So now, as you sit in your tent or in the quiet of a castle, after yet another campaign, you're faced with a question you've never truly allowed yourself to ask before. What's the point of all this? The answers are hard to come by, but you begin to realize something important. The only thing that's kept you going all these years is the same thing that got you here in the first place. Fear. Fear of failing. Fear of losing everything. Fear of being left behind. It's not honor or glory that keeps you in the saddle. It's the fear that, without knighthood, you'd have nothing. But maybe that's the problem, isn't it? You've tied your entire identity to this role, to this life. You've lived and breathed knighthood so completely that you've lost sight of who you are without it. And the worst part is, you're starting to realize that even if you walked away from it all, if you took off your armor, if you abandoned the title of Sir, you'd still be the same person. A man haunted by his own past, by his own choices, historians in hindsight often romanticize the idea of knighthood, painting it as a noble life of virtue and sacrifice. But for the men who lived it, it's just a long road of struggle, of survival, and of playing a part in a game where the rules are always changing and never in your favor. The blood you've spilled, the lives you've taken, it all fades into the background. What remains is the weariness in your bones, the ache in your heart, and the quiet understanding that the life you've built for yourself might not have been worth the cost. You've reached a point where every battle feels like an echo of the last one. The rush, the fear, the noise, they're all fading into a dull background hum. Even your comrades, the ones you once fought alongside with shared purpose, seem distant now. There's no camaraderie left, no thrill of the fight. It's all just business. Another day in a long string of endless campaigns. You start to wonder if you've ever really been part of something meaningful, or if you've just been part of a much larger machine grinding away without end. When you first became a knight, you imagined yourself a hero. You were going to change the world, right? You were going to be the shining sword that protected the innocent, the noble warrior who fought for justice and glory. You were going to be the one that stories were written about. You'd be immortalized in song and legend, your name spoken in the same breath as the greatest knights who came before you. But what happened to that dream? What happened to that fire inside you? It feels like it was consumed somewhere along the way, lost in the fog of war, buried beneath the weight of endless campaigns, obligations, and the constant need to prove your worth. Instead of feeling like a hero, you feel more like a soldier, just another cog in a machine. And that machine, as you've come to realize, has no use for heroes. It just needs bodies. When the sun rises on yet another battle, you can't help but feel a sense of dread. Not fear, necessarily. No, you're beyond fear now. But there's something heavier than fear weighing on your chest. It's the exhaustion. The deep, gnawing, bone-weary exhaustion of living a life that feels like it's leading nowhere. The knightly code, once a source of pride, now feels like a set of rules written to trap you. The oaths you took, the promises you made, they no longer feel like a source of honor. They feel like chains. Chains that bind you to a life you no longer believe in. The battlefield is quieter these days. Maybe it's the fact that you've seen it all before, or maybe it's because you've grown numb to the sounds of war. But as you ride out once more, you start to wonder, will this be the battle that ends it all? Will this be the one where you finally meet your end and can just stop? You think about the life you've lived, the pain, the glory, the loss, and it all seems like a strange dream, an absurd one at that. The truth is, the life of a knight is not the life you thought it would be. And by now, you've seen enough to understand that the idealized image of knighthood, the chivalric knight, the shining warrior who defends the weak, is mostly just that, an image. The reality is more mundane. It's filled with politics, betrayal, personal ambition, and endless labor. The work of a knight isn't about honor, it's about survival. And maybe that's the saddest part of all. You have spent your entire life fighting for something you never really understood. The very idea of knighthood, the ideals you believed in so passionately when you were young, have been hollowed out by the harsh realities of power and war. Honor, loyalty, justice, they've all been corrupted, twisted, used as tools in a game that's bigger than any of you. Historians still debate how the decline of knighthood came about. Some say it was the rise of gunpowder, the introduction of firearms that made the knight obsolete. Others argue it was the growing importance of standing armies and the diminishing power of feudal lords. But one thing is clear. As times changed, so did the role of the knight. What was once a noble profession is now a shadow of itself, a memory of a past age, a time when knights ruled the battlefield and held the world in their armored hands. Yet here you are, still in the saddle, still in the thick of it. You might not be the young, idealistic knight you once were, but you're still a knight. You still wear the armor, still wield the sword, but it all feels so empty. There's no glory left in it, no sense of fulfillment, just the slow march of time, the endless cycle of battle, and the quiet realization that there's nothing to fight for anymore. And perhaps that's the cruelest truth of all. When you become a knight, you think you're joining a noble cause, but in the end, you're just one more soldier. One more cog in a system that chews up men and spits them out without a second thought. The cause is never as important as the fight, and the fight is never as important as the next one. It's an endless cycle of survival, where the only thing that matters is whether or not you make it through to the next day. It's a thought that weighs heavily on you as you face yet another foe across the field. You're not fighting for glory or for honor. You're fighting because you have to, because it's the only thing left for you to do. And as you raise your sword, you know that, no matter the outcome, it won't change anything. The battle will end, the world will keep turning, and you'll still be a knight. Maybe not the knight you once dreamed of being, but a knight nonetheless. You've realized something. There is no end to it. You can fight, you can win, you can lose, but the role will always be the same. The armor, the sword, the title, they're just pieces of the puzzle. Pieces that you've spent your life putting together, never realizing that the picture they form is one you never wanted to see. But now it's too late. You can't go back. The life of a knight has consumed you, and it will continue to consume you until the end dot. And maybe, in the end, that's the true tragedy of knighthood. The years are starting to feel like a blur now. You've lived through enough campaigns to fill 100 lifetimes, and yet, here you are, fighting once again for something that no longer feels real. The smell of blood, the clang of swords, the cries of men in agony. They've all blended into the same persistent noise, one you can no longer escape. You can't remember the last time you saw a battlefield with fresh eyes. Every skirmish feels like just another version of the last, and the victories, when they come, feel hollow. You have fought for honor, for loyalty, for your lord. But what does any of it matter when the world keeps spinning without a thought for your efforts? It's hard to reconcile the man you've become with the boy who first put on the armor. He had dreams of glory that would last forever. You were supposed to be a hero, standing tall in your shining armor, vanquishing foes with noble precision. Instead, you've become a living relic of a dying system. You are a knight, yes, but in a world that's moved past knights, past chivalry, past the very idea of what you once represented. You're no longer the protector of the realm, but another pawn in a game of political chess. You wonder what happened. Where did the dream go? When did the fighting stop being about honor and start being about survival? Was it when you first saw the brutality of war? Or was it when the rewards you expected for all your sacrifice never came? Perhaps it was both. Because now, the armor feels heavier than it ever did. Not just physically, but emotionally. The weight of the years is pressing down on your shoulders, suffocating you. The battles have worn you down, but it's not just the physical toll. It's the realization that the world doesn't need knights anymore. And deep down, you're terrified that you have no place in it. The saddest part is that you can't even remember why you fought anymore. The causes are forgotten. The wars blend into one long, exhausting march. You're no longer sure what was worth fighting for. And worse, you know the world is no better because of it. You wonder if there was ever a true cause at all, or if you were just swept along in a current too powerful to resist. As you sit in camp on yet another cold night, staring into the fire, you realize something terrifying. You have nothing else. You've given everything to this life. The sword, the shield, the banner. These are the only things that define you now. You've sold your soul to knighthood, and there's nothing left for you outside of it. No family, no friends, no future beyond the battles that continue to rage. The silence that follows each fight is deafening, but it's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of a life that has been reduced to nothing. Historians still debate whether knights, particularly those in the later Middle Ages, ever saw themselves as victims of circumstance. Were they noble warriors upholding a grand tradition? Or were they, in fact, just soldiers swept up in a social system that didn't know how to change? Some argue that the disillusionment of knights was inevitable, given the unyielding demands placed on them. Others claim that their downfall came from within, from a failure to adapt to a changing world. Either way, the knightly order, as it once was doomed to fade into history. You feel that same doom creeping into your own soul. How many times have you told yourself that this battle would be your last? How many times have you wished to simply walk away, to discard the armor and ride off into the unknown? But the truth is that you're trapped. The world has changed, yes, but it hasn't made a place for men like you. The knight, the warrior, the protector. You're all outdated now. The rise of the mercenary, the common soldier, and the standing army have rendered you irrelevant. And yet, you are still here, still fighting, still trapped in this endless cycle. Because what else is there? You try to tell yourself that there's honor in the fight, that there's pride in being a knight, but the words feel empty. You know it's not true. You know that honor is a facade, a mask worn by those in power to keep the masses obedient, to keep you obedient. The sword in your hand feels like a reminder of everything that's been stripped away from you. Your freedom, your dreams, your sense of purpose, and then it hits you. You have been fighting for others your whole life, for your lord, for your comrades, for the realm. But who have you fought for yourself? You've spent decades serving other people's causes, bending your life around their needs and desires, never once stopping to ask what you need or want. What have you really achieved? Have you ever even asked yourself if this is the life you wanted? But it's too late for questions now. You can't change what you've become. You have spent so long playing the part that you've forgotten what it's like to be just you. And even if you could walk away from it all, what would you do? Who are you outside of the armor, the sword, the endless war? The battlefields are no longer places of glory for you. They're just reminders of how far you've fallen. The faces of fallen comrades, the cries of dying men, they no longer stir anything inside you. Not anger, not sadness, just a hollow emptiness. You've seen it all, you've lived it all, and in the end, nothing has changed. The knights still fight. The lords still demand. the peasants still suffer. Historians, looking back, might romanticize the life of the knight, painting it as a glorious existence filled with honor and nobility. They might tell stories of bravery and valor, of knights riding out to protect their people, of battles won and lands conquered. But for you, the truth is different. The life of a knight isn't about chivalry or honor, it's about survival. And for all your fighting, for all your sacrifice, survival has become the only thing that matters. You've come to accept it, though. The weight of it all, the endless cycle of war and duty. It's who you are now, and it's who you'll always be. There's no going back, and there's no real way forward either. You'll keep fighting, keep riding, because that's all you know how to do. Maybe, just maybe, there's a small part of you that still believes in the idea of knighthood. But the reality of it is something far darker, something you can't escape. And as you prepare for yet another campaign, you realize that this might be the end of the line. Not just for you, but for the very idea of what it meant to be a knight. Another dawn breaks over the horizon, casting a muted glow on the camp. The chill of the morning air bites into your skin, and you pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders as you rise from the fire. The distant sounds of the men stirring from their rest blend with the low murmurs of the wind, but there's no excitement in the air, no anticipation, no sense of hope or purpose. It's just another day, another fight, another endless march toward something that no longer feels important. As you slip into your armor for what seems like the 1,000th time, you can't help but reflect on the years of repetition. The same routine, the same sacrifices, the same empty victories, the same hollow defeats. You once thought that becoming a knight would mean living a life of distinction, but now you see that the distinction comes only in the form of scars, both physical and emotional, and they don't feel like badges of honor anymore. They feel like wounds, reminders of a life that has been spent fighting for causes that never truly mattered to you. You think about the other knights you've known. There were those who sought glory, those who sought power, and those who, like you, were just looking for something to hold on to in a world that seemed increasingly unstable. Some of them found their glory in battle, their names written in the sagas. Some of them found their power by climbing the social ladder, ingratiating themselves with powerful lords, amassing land and wealth. And some of them, like you, found nothing but an endless road of combat, a life defined by war and bloodshed, with no real reward other than the promise of more battles to fight. But as you put on your helmet and adjust your sword, you can't shake the feeling that there's something bigger at play here, something you've been blind to for so long. You have spent your life fighting for an ideal, for a system that doesn't care about you, that doesn't value your sacrifices, and that never will. The knightly order has always been one of service, but service to whom? To kings who only care about their own power, to lords who use you as a tool in their personal feuds, to a people who may never even know your name. You've long suspected that the life of a knight was built on a lie, but now, as the reality sinks in, you realize how deeply ingrained that lie has become. You've been a servant to a system that's not only broken, but doesn't even want to be fixed. The ideals of chivalry, the code of honor, the vows you swore, all of it was just a mask, a veneer to cover the raw, ugly truth. You were never a protector of the weak. You were never a defender of the realm. You were simply a pawn in a game of power. As you ride out to the battlefield once again, You see the same faces that have been with you through the years. You see the tired eyes of your comrades, the men who have followed the same path, who have given everything for the same cause. They don't look like knights anymore. They look like men who have been worn down by the endless fight, men who are more concerned with surviving than with glory. You can almost hear the thoughts in their minds, echoing your own. What is the point of all this? And yet, the fight goes on. The battle continues. The clash of steel on steel reverberates across the field, and you are once again thrust into the heart of it. You fight because you have no choice. You fight because it's the only thing you've ever known. The code of chivalry, the very code that has dictated your life for so long, feels more like a distant memory now, a faint echo of something that used to matter. You can't even remember the last time you believed in it fully. Historians still argue whether the rise of professional armies signified the death of the knight. Some claim that as warfare evolved, the role of the knight became obsolete, replaced by more effective, trained soldiers who could fight with discipline and efficiency. Others argue that the decline was a slow process, beginning with the erosion of feudal loyalty and the increasing power of monarchs. Either way, it's clear that knights like you were slowly being phased out, their role in society being redefined. And now, standing in the midst of another fight, you realize that you've already been replaced. You can't deny the reality of it anymore. The knights of the past were warriors who fought with pride, but those days are gone. The world is changing, and knights, once seen as the protectors of the realm, are now seen as outdated relics, their place in the world uncertain at best. And yet, here you are, still holding on to the past, still wearing the armor, still swinging the sword, still fighting for something that no longer exists. In the heat of battle, the noise of clashing swords and the cries of the dying become a blur. You fight mechanically, without thinking, without feeling. It's all become a routine. The thrill of combat is gone. The glory is gone. The honor is gone. There's nothing left but the battle itself, the endless struggle for survival, and the realization that you've given everything and received nothing in return. As the day winds down and the blood-soaked field grows quiet, you are left standing amidst the carnage, just like you've been left standing countless times before. But this time, it's different. This time, you feel it, the finality of it all, the end of an era, not just for the knights, but for you. You realize that you are in a way the last knight, the last of a dying breed, a man who has fought and lived and bled for a cause that no longer has meaning. It's hard to say when it happened. Perhaps it was gradual. Perhaps you've always known, deep down, that this life wasn't sustainable. But now, it's undeniable. The knight you once were is gone. The dream of knighthood is gone. All that remains is the shell of a man, caught in a world that no longer wants him. As you look out over the battlefield, you realize that the world doesn't need knights anymore. The world is moving forward, and you're still clinging to the past. The era of the knight is over, and perhaps, for the first time, you're ready to let it go. The night after the battle is always quiet. The field, once alive with the chaos of clashing swords and shouting men, is now eerily still, save for the wind rustling through the remnants of broken banners and discarded armor. You stand there in the aftermath, the ground beneath your feet still slick with blood, but the urgency is gone. No one is rushing toward the front lines anymore. No one is frantically preparing for the next charge. The battle is over. And while the world keeps spinning, something inside you has come to a complete halt. You can't help but wonder how many times you have stood in this same spot, after the same type of battle, feeling the same disillusionment settling in your bones. The bodies of your comrades and enemies alike lie side by side, all part of the same brutal, pointless cycle. You used to think you were doing something noble by wielding your sword, but now it just feels like a cruel joke. How many more nights like this can you endure before you break? The firelight casts long shadows across the field, and you can see the men, your fellow knights, gathered around their own small fires. Their faces are just as hollow as yours. No one speaks of victory anymore, and the word honor has lost all meaning. Even the younger knights, who you once thought had the bright-eyed idealism you had once held so dearly, are now jaded, worn out from the constant violence. They are becoming like you, fighting because they must, not because they believe. As you sit by your own fire, poking at the dying embers, you realize something unsettling. You are no longer sure who the enemy even is. The battles have become so routine that the line between friend and foe seems to blur. Was this war ever about defending the people? Was it about protecting the realm? Or was it just another tool for the rich and powerful to maintain control over the weak? All you've ever done is fight for others. But who exactly are you fighting for now? The king, your lord, your comrades? Or is it all just one long, indistinguishable war, fought for no reason but the perpetuation of war itself? Historians debate whether knights were always aware of this truth, the truth that they were pawns in a game that they didn't understand. Some believe they were kept in the dark, their ideals carefully nurtured by those in power, while others claimed the knights knew exactly what they were doing, driven by a thirst for glory and riches. But you've come to understand it all too well. This isn't about glory, it's about power, and when the wars are over, the knights are forgotten. It's the kings and the lords who write the histories, and they always paint themselves as the victors. It wasn't supposed to end like this. You were supposed to be a legend, but in the end, you are just another soldier who fought for a cause he never truly understood. The battlefield, which once promised glory, now feels like a place of endless futility. And yet, tomorrow, you will rise, put on your armor, and march again. Not because you want to, but because that's what knights do. As dawn approaches, the coldness of the night seeps deeper into your bones. The fire flickers low, and the murmurs of your comrades fade into silence. You've spent years, decades, fighting. And in all that time, you've never really asked yourself why. You've just done it because that's what knights do. The code, the honor, the blood, none of it matters now. What you once thought was a noble calling now feels like an endless, futile cycle. It's as if you've been a puppet, with someone else pulling the strings, and now the strings have finally snapped. The only thing left is the weight of your own armor. You stand, stretching stiff limbs, and stare out at the horizon. The battlefield is still and quiet, but you know it's only temporary. Soon, the sun will rise, and with it, more blood will be spilled. More soldiers will die. More men will fight and fall for a cause they don't understand, and the world will keep turning. It's a depressing thought, and you can't shake the feeling that nothing you've done will matter in the end. The battlefields are where you've lived for so long, and it's where you'll probably die. You know that, deep down. But a small part of you still wonders if there's another way, another life Perhaps. A life without the weight of armor and the endless responsibility. But that life is nothing but a fantasy, one that belongs to the stories of the past, not to men like you. So, you push those thoughts aside. Grab your sword and prepare to face the day. The only thing left is to survive, just as you always have. As you saddle your horse and ready yourself for another day of conflict, you hear the voices of the men around you. They, too, are preparing, as if they've accepted the same unspoken truth. There's no escape from this life, no end to the fighting. You wonder how many of them, like you, wish they could walk away from it all. But that's not an option. Not for knights. You've been born into this life, and now you will die in it. Your name will never be sung in ballads. Your story will never be remembered in grand histories. You will simply fade into the background of 1,000 forgotten wars, a footnote in the annals of history. And yet, even as the bitter realization settles in, you ride out once again, your armor clinking with each step. The battlefield awaits, and you will fight. Not for honor, not for glory, but for survival. That's all it ever was, after all. Survival. The code, the ideals, they were just a facade. The only thing that matters now is making it through another day, another battle. You've lost count of how many times you've told yourself that this one will be different, and that this one might be the last. But it never is. You've grown numb to it all. The orders, the strategy, the bloodshed. They come so predictably now that you hardly need to think about them. You just move, just act, like an automaton going through the motions. If you stopped to question the point of it all, you might collapse under the weight of the answer. So, you don't. The sun has barely crested the horizon when you hear the first rumblings of the army forming up. The tension in the air is almost palpable, and yet you can't bring yourself to feel anything. Maybe this is what it means to be a knight in the later years. To be a body, a soldier, nothing more. All that once mattered, all that once stirred pride in your chest, now feels hollow. The glint of your armor is just another piece of metal. The sword in your hand, another tool for destruction. The world has moved on, leaving you behind. You glance over at the young knights around you. They'd look fresh-faced, eager even, ready to prove themselves. You can see the spark of idealism in their eyes, the naive belief that this fight will bring something meaningful. You almost pity them, because you know that spark will burn out soon enough. It always does. The battlefield has a way of draining the soul, of stripping away the innocence of youth and replacing it with the grim reality of survival. They'll learn soon enough, just as you did, that the dreams of glory and honor are just that, dreams. And when they wake up, it'll be too late. You can finally rest. Good night. Sweet dreams.